Alright folks, let's talk about self-control. When I say self-control, what comes to mind? What is self-control to you, and how do you think it can have implications across our mental health and how we see ourselves, and not only that, how other people see us? So we want to talk about the importance of health. We want to talk about the importance of mental health. And when we say self-control, you might think of, well, oh, I kind of get what that means. It's kind of like discipline. It's you're in control of yourself. Maybe you pull back on your impulses. When you think about control, maybe you think about having power over something, dominion over something. There's a level of empowerment. There's a level of autonomy. For example, I have such self-control that I stayed home to study instead of going out to the party. Or that even though I love to drink, I only do it on certain occasions and I don't do it every day. Maybe that's you exercising your self-control. Now let's talk about the importance of this and what it does to us mentally and how we view ourselves. If we use those examples earlier, which would be to abstain or to withdraw or to be hesitant to engage in our impulses, because we can control ourselves, we can control our desires, what does that make you? I want you to think of two people. One of them who says yes to every chance at pleasure that he or she gets, whether it's in food, whether it's in sexual pleasure, whatever it may be. And the other person who is selective, who doesn't say yes to everything. If you want to talk about self-esteem, if you want to talk about confidence, the person who's saying yes to every suitor that's available, guess what? It'll feel good in the short term, immediately. But in the long term, they're kind of just saying yes to everything. How much value does their yes have? Versus, you have an individual who says no, 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 yes. It's having the options, but choosing not to exercise every single one just because you have them. Just because you have chocolates and chips and crackers and everything on the table doesn't mean you have to eat everything there at once. There's a difference, folks, between not having options and saying you exercise self-control versus having options and actually exercising self-control. If you tell yourself, I'm extremely disciplined with food, with chocolates, with desserts, with cakes, with chips, I will believe you. You might not even have any of that stuff at home to begin with. But if you're out at a party and those things are readily available, you have the opportunity to engage in those things. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to exercise your self-control. When we engage in self-control, when we push off pleasure or when we delay it, what are we telling our body? We are telling our body, hey, I'm still in control here. I'm in charge. I am the captain of this ship. I get to decide what we do. And that, my friends, is a very, very empowering feeling. I'm sure you've heard about self-help books or other books or psychologists, counselors who've said the importance of doing laundry, cleaning a room, being tidy, brushing your teeth. Why? Why? What's the point here? Who cares if... I don't understand if you're depressed and someone's saying, pick your sweater up off the ground. How does that even associate with someone saying, look, I don't feel good? Because behind the sweater on the ground, behind the idea, well, it's just nice to be organized and be tidy, underneath it all, there's an element of control, which says, I am going to do something that is going to have an impact on my environment. It reinforces this idea that my actions matter. What I do matters, whether it's at the small scale of my sweater on the floor, to what I say to someone at a party, to the investments that I make financially later on, the career decisions I make, whether to go to college, whether to pursue higher education or not. So it's a way of emphasizing the autonomy that we have. We are not just some passenger who's just aiming wondrously through life. Like, you have some say in what you do. Even if it's as little as how to clean your room, where to put the furniture, when to brush your teeth, when to floss, what food to eat. And when we have these things, we get to practice self-control. It's also important to remember that with self-control comes sacrifice. It's hard to have self-control. When you see someone who looks like they engage in pleasure, no one's sitting there like, I wonder why she eats chips all day. Or I wonder why Billy sleeps with every girl the chance he gets. It's like, why wouldn't you, right? It's fun, it's amazing, you feel amazing. To stand back and to take care of your body. To go to the gym when you don't want to. To be careful of what you're putting into your body, even though you're always craving chocolates and sugary stuff. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. And there's a lot of immediate upside to engaging in those pleasures. But in the long term, not only what happens to your body, like physically, but what you do to yourself mentally is a conversation that we don't have enough. What happens to your brain if you're a kind of person who says, if I see chocolate, I have to eat it? If I wake up late, I have to sleep in. If I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, I have to sit there for at least 3 hours before I can get up. When we start to make these beliefs about ourselves, about what we are capable of, how do you think that impacts us going forward? Now, there's a conversation to be had here about balance and about it's okay to engage in pleasure, which it absolutely is. This by no means is a voice, is a call out to not engage in pleasure. However, there's something that we lose whenever we engage in that stuff involuntarily. I'll give you an example. If I say, I'm working on today, tomorrow, I'm going to give myself Sunday off. That's voluntary. There's control in that. You know what? I'm going to go out with friends on Friday night. I'm going to drink. I'm making the conscious decision. I'm leading it rather than saying, I'm just too tired to go to the gym today or tomorrow or the day after. Or going to a party not planning on drinking and saying, I can't help myself. I had to. It was just there on the table. I had to. I know it was just so hard. I thought about how good it tasted. So folks, there's voluntary engaging in pleasure, and that's totally different. There's a difference between procrastinating when you have to study for an exam versus taking time off. I know I have to study for an exam, so I'm going to be on my phone for 3 hours. Or, look, I'm not in a place to focus. I'm not going to procrastinate. I might as well go out for a walk. I might as well go to the gym. So there's a level of independence. There's a level of choice. Because if we surrender that choice, then what happens? We become a slave to our desires. We become a slave to our impulses. And at a high level, when we're dealing with things that are very potent, and potent is just a fancy word for strong, we can dig ourselves down a very, very deep rabbit hole. Drinking 1 can of Coke today isn't going to do much for you. Drinking it every day, 7 days a week, for the next 4 or 5 years, now we have a problem. And the hard thing is you can't go clean for 2 weeks and expect it to make up for the 5 years. There's a tax that we have to pay, folks, whether it's in the short term or whether it's in the long term. In the words of most existentialists, it's like, look, you are going to suffer. As a human being, it is part of the deal. You are born, you will die, and in between, you will endure some suffering. Some people more than others. And if you may be lucky enough to decide your suffering, what would you like? Would you like endless pleasure in the short term with unknown, impossibly fatal consequences in the long term? Or would you like vice versa? Missing out on a lot of the pleasures, having FOMO, fear of missing out, like you should be doing things that you aren't doing. But then maybe when you get older, patting yourself on the back and going, you know what, maybe this was the right thing to do. So self-control really gets exercised in the presence of opportunities. Let's say you have two people together, Billy and Jane. What are the chances that Billy is going to cheat in his relationship? Let's say it's 5%, all right? Now, what happens if Billy has a friend who's a girl and he's attracted to her? What happens then? Let's say they're out at a party and they're in a club and they're dancing. Let's say they're both drinking and they're dancing together, and then both of them go back to her place with some other friends as well. All of a sudden, the environment, the drinking, being friends, going from a very loud and close and place where everyone's elbow to elbow to a little bit quieter place. Now you have more opportunities to engage in short-term pleasure. And the question becomes, do we exercise self-control? Should we exercise? People are going to say, well, of course, Daniel, it's the right thing to do, and it's wrong, and infidelity is wrong, and people shouldn't do it. I hear you. But it's so easy to do it. Because it's like, what's the big deal? It's one night. My partner probably won't find out. What's the harm in having some pleasure? It's fun, and it's exciting, it's filled with adrenaline. Why not? Because we don't talk about what engaging in those things does to us mentally in relation to self-control. And if you made a decision beforehand, like, yeah, I'm going to cheat on my partner, well, that's a different story. You're in a different category. That's a different story for a different day. So, folks, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this idea. So little things in your life, try to take back control. Whether it's the certain foods you eat, whether it's, I don't know, how many showers you take, how tidy you keep your room, whatever it may be. Find ways to exercise self-control, to make sure that your mind recognizes, I'm the one in charge here. Like, I'm the one making the decisions. Because if we don't, what ends up happening is the person who, let's say, has a messy room or drinks whatever's on the table or sleeps with whoever wants to, they kind of build this identity of, I'm someone who just gives in to whatever opportunities are in front of me. What kind of an employee does that make? What kind of a long-term partner does that make? What kind of a strong person does that make? Can you really look at a woman like that and say they have a strong character? Or a man, or, either or. If they're like, yeah, it's fine, but if there are desires, if there are impulses, it's not in my control, I can't hold back, I have to eat it. Like, oh, really? Huh. So if you start dating someone and you see someone attractive, you have to sleep with them? You can't hold yourself back? Self-control, folks, self-control. It's not about the specific act itself. I hope you're not getting me wrong here. It's not about a little thing here or there. It's about the principle. It's about the principle of how we engage in pleasure and the voluntary versus involuntary aspect of it. And if we can become aware of this right now, once you're done listening to this, and anything that you do, you can think about the control that you're exercising. It's like, I sat there and watched TV for 4 hours because it was just easy. Okay. Versus, look, I got off work. I'm going to plan on watching TV tonight because I enjoy my favorite show on Netflix. I don't want to work out every day. It's like, fair enough, man. But remember, you are practicing. It's you. You're making a choice. It's not like you're sitting on the couch because I have to sit on the couch. No. You're making a decision to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, which is great. Which is awesome. As long as you recognize that you made that decision. The power is in your hands. It was a voluntary choice. And if it's voluntary, there was autonomy. And if there was autonomy, there's empowerment. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.